Taking you live to the Ontario Legislature, where question period is currently underway. Let's listen in to Education Minister Stephen Lecce.
1,000 more teachers focused on literacy and math, 1,000 additional teachers focused on de-streaming. And I know that the members opposite will continue to oppose measures that incrementally make a difference in schools. They have an opportunity today to vote for our budget and our new plan to improve schools, to expect better from our school boards, and to demand that our education leads to student achievement and better outcomes in reading, writing and math. Vote for our budget, vote for our investments, vote for better in Ontario schools.
Supplementary question.
Speaker, the education funding that was announced yesterday doesn't even remotely keep pace with inflation, let alone address the 3 years of learning disruption that have been impacting our kids so deeply. So if they're not investing in our students and their future, what are they doing? They're micromanaging school boards, they're labeling community schools as real estate assets, and they're introducing new fees. That's what they're doing, Speaker. Back to the Premier. If he isn't going to invest in schools, will he at least not stick them with the bill for ministry responsibilities?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, from healthcare to housing to education, the status quo defender here in the Leader of the Opposition, defending the status quo when we all know we can do better for our children, and they deserve better in Ontario schools. We introduced legislation that is premised on raising standards, increasing accountability, and enshrining the voice of parents in our education system. What about that is so offensive to the Leader of the Opposition? What about making sure that we have better outcomes tied to student achievement, so we actually see higher outcomes related to reading, writing, and math? What is offensive about ensuring that we build schools faster, that we certify new educators quicker? What is offensive about ensuring that new teachers are better educated on math, on literacy, on mental health, and special education? It is opposition systematically to progress and to change. We will stand up for kids and drive this legislation forward.
The final supplementary.
Speaker, when is this government going to start taking responsibility? 5 years. 5 years. The status quo is their terrible record. It's the same old story that we've heard from this minister and this government for years now, and that's how out of touch they are. They're micromanaging municipalities. They're ideologically dismantling public health care. And now they're grabbing power from school boards. I don't know a parent or a teacher in this province who trusts this government to deliver quality education to our children.
Order. Inside, come to order.
I mean, just look at the state of education in this province right now. Order. They don't want to hear it. No. They don't want to hear it. But we see it every day. Back to the Premier. His plan is going to force the layoffs of teachers and education workers across this province. Will he reverse course and invest in the supports that students need to thrive?
Members to please take their seats. Minister of Education to respond.
It is ironic, recognizing that in the last election, the New Democrats lost 300,000 votes for the people of Ontario. So when you want to talk about public confidence, we have a mandate to demand better for Ontario children. There are 83 progressive Conservatives, a historic achievement because the people of Ontario have confidence in our Premier and in our party to stand up for parents and to demand better from the system of education. We are increasing the hiring by 2,000 more frontline staff. We are refocusing our system of education on what matters most. Back to the basics. Back to ensuring young people have the fluency in the skills that will help set them up for long-term success. Madam Speaker, the member opposite, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite speaks about mental health. In this budget, we've increased it by 500%, over $100 million, a significant increase to help children succeed. We're going to continue to drive reform and demand better for Ontario children.
The next question. Once again, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. On Thursday, the Ombudsman's Office released their latest report on child welfare agencies in the province. We heard about Misty, a 13-year-old Indigenous girl from Northern Ontario who repeatedly went missing while living in a home operated by Johnson Children's Services. which, as many of you already know, is a private provider. They were found to be particularly remiss in their obligations to provide care to Misty. The Ombudsman made 58 recommendations. As a result, 31 of them were directed toward Johnson Children's Services. So, Speaker, my question is very simple. What does the Premier plan to do to act on the important recommendations of the Ombudsman?
Children, Community and Social Services.
Speaker, and I thank the honourable colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. There is absolutely no room whatsoever in our system for individuals, entities or organizations that either willfully or through neglect fail in their duty of care towards children, Mr. Speaker. Every single child in our province, Mr. Speaker, whether they're in care or not, deserve the right to live in peace and safety. And I'm glad to be able to share, Mr. Speaker, that all 3 organizations that were at the centre of the Ombudsman report have accepted all 58 recommendations from the Ombudsman, Mr. Speaker. But it's critical that although these all the 58 recommendations need to be implemented swiftly so that something like this never happens again across this province, Mr. Speaker. And while none of these recommendations are directed at the or directed towards the Ministry of Children, Community, Social Services, we will nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, use this report to inform the continuing work of redesigning child welfare across the province.
The supplementary question.
I want to go back to the Premier on this one. It's a very important question. Misty went missing 7 times while she was in Johnson Children's Services care. At one point, the staff waited to report Misty missing to the police for more than 4 hours, and that resulted in her disappearance for 19 days. 19 days, Speaker. I want everyone in this House to imagine a child going missing for 19 days. What's worse, Johnson was being paid to provide her with one-on-one support. The Ombudsman found they failed to provide this level of care. He also found significant gaps in documentation, in record-keeping, and training practices. Speaker, Johnson Children's Services failed Misty. To the Premier, why are private providers with documented negligence still allowed to operate in Ontario?
Minister of Children, Community and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The events outlined in the Ombudsman report are absolutely unacceptable, and there will be absolutely no room and zero tolerance, Mr. Speaker. As I said, every single child, every single youth in our province deserves to have a safe and loving home, regardless of whether they're in care, Mr. Speaker. Again, the 3 organizations in the case have accepted all 58 recommendations, but we are asking and we'll make sure that all 58 recommendations are implemented swiftly, Mr. Speaker, so that this never happens to a single child or youth across the province. And Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of this Premier Ford, as I said from day one, no child or youth will ever be left behind. We'll make sure that never happens.
And the final supplementary.
We're listening into question period at Queen's Park today, and Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles addressing the Ford government on multiple issues, including a very recent Ombudsman report on the foster care system and the Ford government's new plan for education.